final presentation mode in Artlantis Studio is the animation capable of animating most of the elements. To set animations, we'll need to open the timeline. It can be found at the bottom of the window replacing the catalog. Whenever you switch to animation, this will be visible by default. The timeline contains information about the duration of the sequence and the number of frames per second. On the rest of the timeline, there are drawn-up sequences. This first one ends exactly at 10 seconds, for example. At the bottom, you'll find settings to lengthen the timeline, for example through this slider. You'll also find the playback controls and an icon to change the timeline with the catalog in case you need to add a library part to the scene. Now let's see what we can animate in Artlantis. We'll begin with the camera animation, which can be done very easily. First, we'll create a path for the camera in the 2D window. Therefore, we'll need to open it and activate the Edit Path mode with this icon, which turns active only in animation mode. Now we can grab the camera and drag it from its initial position into its final position. The path can be edited with the tangents, or we can add new control points with a right-click and choose the Add Controls option. The path can also be closed and managed in all projection modes in the 2D window. After we finished, we turn off the Edit Path mode. The newly created animation will appear on the timeline and we can review it. Depending on your processor power, the preview may appear less or more pixelated. To avoid that, you can turn the preview display into opengl mode to increase the fluidity. What else can we animate? Objects, for example. This should be done exactly the same way as with cameras, but before we do that, we'll need to open the Object Inspector. I'll switch to the catalog and look for animated people. This one looks good, so I'll drag and drop it into the scene. Animated people are specific objects that can behave differently. In the Object Inspector, we'll find a small list of behaviors that we can choose from. These objects can get a path exactly the same way cameras do. We open the 2D window and activate the Edit Path mode. Then we drag the object from its initial position into the final one, where we can edit the path either by adding new control points from the contextual menu, or by closing the path, or curving it with the tangents. When we finished, we close the Edit Path mode. Once the object has a path, the list of behavior changes into walking, running, or similar. Here we can decide the way it moves. In the timeline, we can play the animation, and if we've chosen the walking option, it will finish its path in a longer time. Other things we can animate is the heliodon. I always start by opening the appropriate inspector, in this case that of the heliodon. Here, I can animate the time, for example, as if several hours were passing during my sequence. To set it, I have to turn on the recording mode first in the timeline. Timeline shows a red stripe, which means that all further settings will be registered. My camera is in the initial position when the time is set to 11 minutes 54 seconds. I move it into the last position of the sequence and change the time manually in the inspector. After I validate, the lighting of the scene will also change for something closer to sunset. The timeline shows a second red stripe, which means that the animation was registered. I've animated the date of the demo heliodon. I can close the recording mode because I finished with the settings. I come back to the first frame of the sequence when the sun is up and it's daytime. If I move the camera to its end, the lighting of the same scene changes for the time I've set in the inspector. During the animation, Artlantis will calculate this transition and apply a different lighting condition for each frame. If you have clouds, they can also be animated in Artlantis. In the dialog, you can activate the wind and set its speed and direction. I can also animate water surfaces with only one click. In the Shader Inspector, I'll make a quick search for such a shader. Here we are. Even if we don't have water surface visible in the preview, let me show you how it works. It's only a checkbox and a slider which sets the speed of the movement. After all this was done, we can launch the final calculation. In this dialog, we can decide whether we wish to calculate all frames or only a part of them. On a PC, if you click on Navigate, you can define the file format for the animation. I'll choose the AVI format for this sequence, but I can also choose TGA or JPEG formats for the independent images. And with this, we've finished reviewing the main functions of Artlantis 6. You are welcome to download a demo version and search for more information on our website at www.artlantis.com.